Dear colleagues, dear students, I'm delighted to welcome you to open lecture of Hans Wissema towards third generation learning. Let me introduce the speaker. So Hans Wissema is a professor emeritus at the Technology University in Delft, the Netherlands. He is also a management consultant and entrepreneur. Hans is an author of the book Towards the Third Generation University. And this book was translated into several languages and even into Russian. And you can find this book in our library in Sberbank section. And I would also like to notice that Hans is also a member of the advisory board of the Institute of Economics and Management. And for a number of years, he is supporting the activities of the Institute and provides valuable advice. So Hans, we want to express our deepest gratitude for that. And dear Professor Wissema, I will no longer spend your valuable time. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much for a very nice welcome. It is actually very nice to be back at Tomsk, the intellectual jewel in the unspoiled wilderness. Isn't that nice? So the students, you have the best of both worlds. And oh, I'm trying to share now.
Yeah, it works.
It works, really. Except that, now I see it. Yes, the idea actually about this new learning, I must say, comes from a visit 2 or 3 years ago in Tomsk, because we were discussing this, and then, well, as things go during a dinner, of course, you make usually at dinners, you make more plans than you can ever fulfill. But the idea was to start an institute of advanced learning as part of the Institute of Economics and Management, and then focus on all kinds of, no, nothing came of that, but instead we turned to make a book. And it has contributors from all over the world, and also from 2 of your distinguished scientists, for which we're very grateful, because they made an important contribution to the book. So what I'm going to say now is largely based on the book, but also, of course, my own private interpretation. Towards the third generation learning, that implies that there are 3 stages or 3 generations of learning. We've had it all for a long time. The person who knows what he or she is talking about, telling the stupid ones who sit in the benches and make notes, I'm sorry, because I'm sure I can't see you, but I'm sure you sit, a lot of students sit in benches and listen to this. So actually what we are doing is exactly the wrong thing, but can't change it at the moment. But it is changing. And then we get 3 stages of learning. The first I call classical learning. Think of Socrates sitting in the agora with his students, nobody knows how many, maybe 6, maybe 10, around him, and questioning them, and this way they learn. So it is a direct interaction between the teacher and the students. But it's also like in ancient times, a father would teach his son how to stay out of the wind, lest the bear they want to shoot doesn't smell them, or the mother teaching a girl things about, I don't know, cooking. Maybe that's too traditional a thought, but anyway. So learning, interaction, teacher and student is as old as humans, and even primates have this. So we still have this. There's nothing wrong with it. It can be interactive, not necessarily exercises. And of course you have not only talks to the teacher, you also, if you do a medicine, you have dissection tables and whatnot. So we still have a good deal of this, but it was learning for the happy few. And as long as only the happy few needed to learn, it worked reasonably well. Then we got the Industrial Revolution. Let's say 1760, 1780, whatever you prefer. 1760, probably more accurate. And all of a sudden, they needed much more specialists in every field. Specialists in the meaning, not in the Russian meaning of specialists in the university, but in the meaning of a craftspeople, people who know their trade, professionals, we would say. And so they revolutionized learning, and they did it, not surprisingly, of course, with the principle that made the Industrial Revolution great. And there's 6 principles, as far as I know. So let's go through specialization. You become more specialized all the time. The professionals, someone said, in the end, we know everything about nothing. You learn more and more, but your focus is narrowing. Look at the Renaissance people like Da Vinci. They were architects, they were painters, and physicists and writers and whatnot. They had it all combined in themselves. No, that was gone. You get specialization. You get standardization. It's amazing if you think of it that there are some, I don't know how many, but probably more than 10 billion telephones in the world. And from your handset, your mobile that you have in your pocket, you can call directly each one of them. Isn't that amazing? And it's because standardization, all the protocols have been standardized. But if you drive your Russian car in, let's say, Western Europe, and some bolt comes out, then the people in the garage will say, that is such and such a bolt. We get it from the magazine, and they fit it in, and it will fit. So standardization is a great asset of the Industrial Revolution. Synchronization is, when it comes to education, the courses connect the students directly to the employers. With the diplomas, I come back to diplomas as the linking pin. Then concentration. In the old days, people would work at home, like the blacksmith, or people weaving, or whatever they were doing, and now all this work became concentrated in factories, thousands of them. And likewise, schools and universities became ever larger things. And I heard that your Moscow State University is now 60,000 students. Now, come on, it's insane amount of students, in my view. But yeah, many universities are like this, and apparently there are economics of scale that benefit. But the concentration, learning factories, maximization, they try to turn out as many as you can. If you would see the presentation we get tomorrow from Professor Nechoda on the Institute of Economics and Management, there are a lot of statistics, how many students, how much PhDs, how much papers, and so on and so forth. Of course, we are proud of that. I'm not saying anything bad of it, but it is part of the inheritance of the Industrial Revolution. People in the Middle Ages, universities wouldn't boast about number of publications they have or number of students or anything. And then, of course, finally, centralization. And I found it still amazing in education that in just about every country, the Ministry of Education has to decide on the courses. And I got a professorship in Turkey, and it had to pass the Ministry of Education in Ankara. My God, as if this university is not able to appoint their own professors. Yeah, centralization, we still have it, and you have it in Russia very much. And of course, universities are the natural enemies of the centralized bureaucratic systems, if you don't mind. Now, why does it no longer work? It worked in a standardized way. And to put it in a nutshell, we are no longer standardized. We are more individualized. And that's why it doesn't work anymore. Students want to make their own choices. They say, I like this, I like that. When I studied, ages ago, really, we had some subjects in physics. I studied chemistry, and I didn't see the use of it. I wanted to do to study a language as a side subject, as a minor. It was not possible. So then it was not possible. Now it becomes increasingly possible that students make their choices. There are more option courses, and there are even universities where students can choose the entire curriculum themselves. But employers also don't want standard people anymore. They want to talk to you and see what kind of a person. Does this person fit in our organization? Yeah, that is a different question than does he have the capability to work as a professional in this or that field. Now, diplomas are the intermediaries. They tell the employer what you as a student are capable of. So they, in theory, in the old days, they didn't even need to see you. Diploma is good enough. You show me your diploma. Oh, okay, yes, you can be electrical engineer in our company. But if this all is individualized, then of course diplomas get a different system. We come back to that. So it's no longer effective because of these reasons. And you see now, if something is no longer effective, then it is being attacked. That is with people, with organizations, and you will find it in your life many times. And here on the education system, the attacks come from two sides. You have demand and you have supply. We stay in the jargon of economics, if you don't mind. Demand is the students, of course. They need education. They're on the demand side, but also employers are on the demand side. They need these people. On the supply side is people who offer education, and in this case, especially people who offer new approaches in education. And we shall see there are a lot of them. But first about diplomas. If you get a diploma saying, I am a Tom State University electrical engineer, it is like a label. And it's the same as when you go to a shop and you buy 1 kilo of sugar, because it will tell you that this pack contains sugar and a bit more than 1 kilo of it. So the diploma tells the employer, I should say, what's in the pack. And as I said earlier, it works with standard people, standard jobs, but not for an individualized society. So I think we get to a different system. First of all, the employer has to make a much bigger job in making a job description, what they expect from this person. And not only, excuse me, that the mathematics of this person is all right, but a lot of other things that we come back to, social skills, for instance, whether he fits into this company, the shares, the values of that company. And then a student can choose a certain curriculum, and when he or she graduates, has to be able to pitch that to possibly employers. Let me tell you who I am. I studied this and that, and I did it for that and that reason. And although I'm an electrical engineer, I also studied the Russian language because I think it is very beautiful. And I wanted to broaden my brain and also have some cells developed in the brain section where the languages sit. Now, then an employer can say, what a nonsense, or he can say, wow, I like this person, it's a bit more than the average. So the diplomas will lose very much their value and they will be replaced by this pitch, but I think they will stay because it's a very good reason if you got a diploma to throw a party. Now, the disrupting tanks from the employers, HR, human resources, they advocate focus on human development, but do they do this? They, I think they're in. I don't know whether they're human resources people in the audience or specialists or tomorrow, but they're in a bind. The HR, they farm out a lot of contracting to recruitment bureaus, and in my part of the world, the people have to go sometimes to 8 tests, have different visits all the time. So imagine that if you apply to 10 jobs, you have to do 80 interviews. It's crazy, totally crazy. And they all want to reduce the risk that they're not getting the best person and so on and so forth. And it's very doubtful whether it works perfectly. So they're lost in transition, the HR practitioners. And increasingly, they prioritize social skills over technical. We come back to social skills because it's one very important theme of this presentation and also of the book on which it is based. Demand side, the students. Yeah, you get different groups of students. They, to be honest, we didn't bother very much if we worked where we worked. It was very much, if it's a prestigious company, it will be better. Nowadays, companies like Unilever, for instance, they become entirely green. They go sustainable products and so on. One reason is that the market, there's a big market for this. A lot of people want to buy healthy stuff, but also the new employees, graduates, they don't want to work with a company that makes rubbish and dirty and so on and so forth. So these companies get a problem attracting the right people. So there's a big shift here. Then young people, they want to work for a coach, and someone who says, okay, you did this. No, let me tell you something. And not, yeah, that was wrong, that was that. I rate you such, you get a rating at the end of the year, and on the rating is based your new salary in January, right? No, they want to be coached, and they may be supervised to a certain extent, but not a boss who tells them what to do. And they say, you work in order to live, you don't live in order to work. And they look at their parents and see how hard they worked and what they missed in life, and they think, I am not going to do this, I will do a better job. No annual performance review, focus on strength, etc. More than half of the millennials, this is 5 years ago a poll, but I don't think it has changed very much. More than half of them feel unengaged at work. They just work for the money, and they sit there and they have no motivation whatsoever. Now that is an alarming figure, and universities are partly guilty of this. So diplomas, well, we've dealt with diplomas. I think there's also a return, the feeling that you study in order to study. You study something that you find interesting. And it's not a cost-benefit analysis only. This was also expressed. Let me look now at the, you can see that the attitude of employees is changing, but also the attitude of students is changing. And both trends cannot be met with the standardized approaches that we are used to, that we have now used for 300 years. No, 250 years. Let's not overdo it. Now let's look at the other side. Now you have school classes. I remember one of my children was a boy in the class, brilliant, but there were two subjects that he didn't like at all, and he didn't pay attention to it because his attitude is, if I don't like it, I don't spend time on it. So he got 2 negative marks at the end of the year, had to repeat the class. Then he was totally demotivated to repeat the class because he knew everything already. He was very smart. So he dropped out of school, and I don't know what happened to him, but he was lost for society. So it's very stupid that we have this same year groups with the repeated full year where there's something wrong. If you think of it, it is very weird. You wouldn't invent it today if you're so used to it, you don't see it. But if you think about it, it's a stupid system. Standard program. Why should all the children go through the same program? Okay, now in grammar schools, you have a little bit of choice. In universities, you have a bit more choice, but still not very much. It's a very small percentage. So I think the trend is towards self-learning, self-study, learning in small groups, tutoring. We'll come to that. Now, social and emotional learning. We used to work with people in the same specialization as we do. When I got a job as a chemist, I was working with other chemists. And we could make jokes that nobody else would understand, but we did. And nowadays, you work in multidisciplinary teams. There are more engineers in an academic hospital. Ask your friends in the medical university in Tomsk. They probably have more engineers working there than physicians. and biologists and all kind of radiation people. I don't know. It's all multidisciplinary, and you have to be able to communicate with someone who is raised in a completely different specialization than you are. It's not easy. That's not easy. Now, then they have much more interaction. It's just not you are part of the team. The team interacts with the company, with society as a whole. This all the time. We have a very open society by now. And then the communications are also increasingly international. Now look at Tomsk, the university, where all these students come from. I was amazed to see this presentation, which will be held tomorrow, actually for the advisory board, where they all come from, and simply amazing. But that is today. It, with all respect, it's nothing special. You have it in a lot of universities, which Tom's are doing very well, but still, it's all international. So if I talk to someone from a totally different culture, I may have to watch my words. Maybe something that I say and consider funny is deeply insulting to the other person, and you have to figure that out. So the soft skills should be in any curriculum. Now that's a big word, right? You try to add a new item to curriculum in a university. That is suicide. I tried it once and it was not very successful, I must admit. But still, these soft skills are very important, and there should be something in the curriculum. And also, if you work with teams, if students solve problems in a team, we'll come to that, then they need to be coached on the way they interact and communicate. I hope I've made my point. We go to phenomenon-based learning. There's the story of, in Finland, that they give in a school, 14-year-old children, 2 boys, 2 girls, and they get an assignment to build a drone and write a manual in French. Now, half of these students don't know what a drone is in the first place. Now, the teacher, who was always so standing up in front of the classroom, he doesn't stand there anymore because they've pulled down all the classrooms, and there are now open spaces with tables you can sit in and corners where you can study yourself. And it's one big space and not benches and so on. If you still have benches in Tomsk, throw them out, give them to the bears, and make rooms with tables where people can study subjects together. And this teacher, instead of being prominent sage on the stage, he sits in the back corner reading his newspaper. A splendid job. And then they say, we don't know how to do it. So they turn to him, ask for advice. He becomes the advisor, the coach of the students, not the teacher as such who tells them what the world is like. No, they have to find it out for themselves. And they managed to fulfill this thing. And I think it is far more interesting for you as students to solve a particular problem than to say, listen, you learn chapters 15 to 19, and next week there will be an exam and we will see whether you understood it or not. That's not motivating. To make something, to have a challenge is motivating. So this is being practiced not only in Finland, all over the world. Gaming. Now, this is a new thing. How much didn't you learn as a small child by games, by playing games? For one thing, I learned how to lose. I was a very bad loser, but yeah, in the end you learn. It was very useful to learn that. But there's a lot of other things you can learn. And nowadays we apply that. Actually, this is a story that comes from Tom, so I'm holding a mirror and hoping I'm saying the right things. You can apply games, not in every teaching exercise, but in a lot of them. And it's very motivating. Students get very engaged, and they learn much more than listening to even a very clever student. Whatever I'm telling you today, in this, certainly if it goes by video, I think research shows that by Saturday morning you have forgotten 80% of it. And if you learn it in a game, it will stick on much longer. Digital storytelling, similar story, basically. You learned a lot, from your parents telling you bedside stories or other stories, teacher telling you history stories and whatever. Now, this storytelling is also now being transferred, becomes digital and more sophisticated than just someone telling you a story. Immersion techniques, virtual reality, augmented reality. I won't go into this, probably you know much more about it than I do. Embedded learning, getting assignments in industry, as you have in Tomsk in certain faculties. But you can do it even while you are at school. And we organized, with the Rotary Club in The Hague, we organized a series of, not lectures really, but talks. People from our club, they would go to the secondary school and talk about the profession they had, and the pupils could ask questions and so on, so they get an idea what the world is like. And there's this interaction which was very useful. In the book there is a case from Yerevan where they had an IT company which had big problems in attracting the right IT specialists. They were simply not available, and if they were available, they would move out to Western countries immediately. And this company was in itself was very successful, but it was threatened that it would have to be closed. So what they did then is to set up a joint course with the university. And now universities and industry are already well used to work together in research. This is also what you do in Tomsk. You have joint research projects. It's not just the company giving you money to do the research, but they also make resources available, their own people and their know-how, databases and so on and so forth. And it's very beneficial to do it that way. But you can also cooperate in the area of education. And what they did, they set up a course in IT. It started after the first year, and they offered a place to the best students. So it was not just for everybody. And if you could only join if you're invited. When you were invited, you got a lot of goodies. Teachers came from the university, but also from the company. And most important of all is that the company had the latest modern equipment, and this area of information technology, these chips, it is changing in an unbelievable way. I mean, not so long ago, the 8 nanometer chip was a big breakthrough, and now they have already 4 nanometers and they're working on 2 nanometers. Simply you cannot imagine. And a university cannot hire the right expertise nor the right machines and so on to teach students. So they have this collaboration, and it works like a piece of cake. Artificial intelligence. Well, you all hear a lot about it, and I have to warn you, it's very much a hype, because people say, if artificial intelligence becomes mature, do we still need lecturers? Now, of course, that's a dream of every rector, to have universities without lecturers and all their silly demands and what have you. But it's not going to happen. It might aid the process, but it won't replace it. And there's a very simple reason for that. I try to put it very briefly. Your brain is made up of 3 elements, right? In the neck, you have your brain stem, which governs the processes you cannot influence. For instance, you cannot decide now that your heartbeat will be 20% higher than it is. Not in the same way that you can I can lift my arm, there's a decision of my will, but I can't influence my sleep cycle, my etc. Then you have what they call the old brain, is where all kinds of processes are, recognition, fear, the pleasure centers, the places where you are alert and so on. And it's about 30%, let's say, of the brain. And the third part is called neocortex, which is relatively early in the development of humankind. And this is about 70% of the brain, and that's like a computer. It's a big computer. So the artificial intelligence, the way I see it, can maybe not replace, but can certainly enhance the neocortex. but to simulate the emotions and all the things that goes on between people, sits in a different part of the brain, and this artificial intelligence has nothing to do with it. So what I'm saying is, be careful in your expectations with artificial intelligence. That's why teachers still matter. Teacher expertise is still the most effective way of learning. I hope that applies to this lecture as well, although I doubt it. No, I haven't mentioned the open source internet courses and so on. Of course, it is very well advanced. I think Coursera has 30 million students or something, an incredible number. And it's good to see that they also collaborate now with Tomsk, as they do at many universities. Yeah, why should you design a specific course if it is already available in Coursera? And there are more of these companies. Now, brain research, and this is also one of the things I want to get across. If you're engaged in learning, you should know your neuroscience. There's so much is happening there. It's going so fast. You really need to stay up to date, and you have to understand how the brain works. So I'd like all the students in the audience, go home tonight and search the internet for sites that explain the workings of the brain. And you really have to do this. Otherwise, you don't know who you are. They can have, neuropixel, they call it. They're very 70 microns across, smaller than a human hair. They insert them in the brain in a certain point. Of course, it doesn't hurt. And they read signals from very tiny group of brain cells. And there are many other ways in which we get an incredible insight. All these scanning techniques and so on, they are so precise. It is simply amazing. And then, of course, we make brain-computer interfaces. I have a niece who is hard hearing, and she got not a hearing aid, but something inside her skull that connects the microphone in this piece of machinery directly to the brain. And you have this with eyes. People who could never see, they can now see because they connect this lens directly to, etc., etc. Artificial limbs, you know all about it. The brain is like a muscle. We always thought, you're born, you get a brain, it becomes a bit bigger, it fills up like if you put water in a water tank, it fills up. And this is not so. The brain is like a muscle. It develops new cells all the time. So one of our authors, David Souza from the United States, he says, teachers are brain changers. And you would have said yes, but he also means this in the most literally form. If you take a scan of your brain after this lecture, there will be a slightly difference with what the scan would have shown at the start of the lecture. Neuroscience, check it out. Then what else? Future of learning. Student is in charge. Courses will increasingly become individualized. I ask a lot of people a question. Suppose you have an IT company. There's a vacancy. You need a new professional. There are two ladies. They're both very good. They have the same age. They're very charming. They fit nicely in the company. And all things being equal, except for one thing, the one lady has studied 100% IT and the other one has studied 75% IT and 25% philosophy. Who do you hire? Now, this is amazing. The vast majority of people say, no, the second one, of course, is much more interesting than just someone who only knows IT. I'm sure if you would have asked the question 20 years ago, people would say, no, of course, I would choose the IT person. What do I need with an IT person who knows something about philosophy? We do IT, we don't do philosophy in this company. So the students can make individual choices, and if they sell it in this pitch we learned earlier, then that will come across. Now, interaction between employers, soft skills, we've dealt with that. Diplomas will no longer be the link point, and a lot of new things will enter the classroom. Now, to go very quickly through the last three sheets, which have a lot of overlap with what I've said already, I just won't read out everything because you can read it. No classrooms, just study rooms, like a lounge where you sit comfortable or you sit at the table. The team projects, some team projects are individual, some are group. No, sorry, some projects are team projects. Others are just individual things or just for two people, whatever. And you get levels, you know, should copy the success of this level thinking in games, which is very popular, I believe. Now, contacts with employers, they start at the first day. Teachers, they become coaches rather than orators. That might bring back some more status to the teachers. Now in the university, with all respect, I think the status comes very much from how much you publish. If you want to make a promotion to become specialist, or how do you call it in Russia, the associate professors, docent, or whatever, yeah, or full professor, then you have to show a lot of publications and standard works and quotations and everything. Whether or not you're a good teacher, I don't think they take it very much into consideration. So I think teaching, it becomes again a profession and something that you can learn. It might even be a bifurcation in university, people who specialize in research and people who specialize in teaching. Institute of Advanced Learning, well, this I've of course copied from Tom's, but I think it should be, some universities should have a center for learning, to study learning and to come with new ideas and so on. Students have to learn to pitch. Now, students in charge, output exams. I call a diploma from university is an output exam. And if you apply for a job, that is an input exam, right? And it will shift to input exams. Oh, no, I was finished anyway. Oh no, here it is still. And finally, and I hope you get this in Tom's, to study, to be a number of years in university should be a transformational experience where you learn much more about the world, you learn a lot about the other sex, you get all kinds of intellectual and social experiences and so on. And in Tom's, you can go bear hunting together and whatnot. So it is not only the cognitive skills, but also other things that you need to do. I hope this is, this ends the talk. I've talked almost 45 minutes, which was the span of attention after the Second World War, and I hope it still is. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Johan, thank you for your lecture.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and right now I think it's time, dear colleagues and dear students, for your questions. If you have any, you're welcome.
I do have a question, may I ask?
Yes, of course, Irina.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. So, Professor, first of all, thank you so much for your lecture. That was significantly interesting and engaging. And I would like to ask you for your opinion on grading system. So, because recently I've read about brain plasticity, that actually it develops while we're making mistakes. So we're actually learning better while we're making mistakes and then kind of realizing which variant was right or correct. So, but due to grading system, like, I guess a lot of people are just kind of started being afraid of making mistakes. That's why probably learning process might be a bit not as efficient as it might be or could be. So what is your opinion on grading system? Like, we get grades at school, at universities. So thank you in advance.
Thank you. It's a very good question, because there's a lot of comment on the grading system, and the systems that put students under enormous stress, not necessary. It's not productive if you put a lot of stress on a person. The outcome of grading system is quite doubtful if you are nervous, And if the next girl is very certain of herself, and then you can be much better and still get a lower grade simply because you're nervous. And so this is very much under discussion. Now, unfortunately, we had, for my book, we had a very good author on this, English professor, who did a report on behalf of the Australian government on this learning. And if you like, if you give your email address to Mrs. Dr. Kass, she will send it to me, and I will forward this article, because he took his book chapter was taken from this earlier report, and the publisher wants only original stuff, so they refuse to publish it, which is very stupid, because it is a very good chapter. I will send it to you if you don't tell anyone else, and then you can look at, if you're critical about rating systems, you will enjoy it.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry, can I ask a question too, please?
Yes.
In the very beginning of the lecture, you have said that you think that now people are becoming more and more individualized. I personally want to argue with this. In the past ages, people had different approach to the information, and therefore their personalities were developing in different manner. But now with globalization, with more common access to all the kinds of different information, people have more or less the same informational sources, which also leads to more or less globalized views. There are some groups of views like socialists, leftists, conservatists, and all others, but inside of those groups, people have more or less the same opinions.
Are more homogeneous.
Yes.
Yeah, I see your point. This is also a very important thing that you mentioned, because I think it's threatened our whole system, our democracy. If you Google 3 times something about Trump, for instance, and then you Google something about, let's say, immigrants, then the system knows already what kind of information you prefer. So you get a whole flood of articles saying how bad it is to have immigrants and what have you. And if you have taken an open approach and Google something else, then you get quite different flow of information. And then people tend to stick to the standard opinions. But maybe there's a balance between this, and I would say the people who are blindly following certain trends in social, like in the United States, they follow Trump. Well, these are not the most intelligent people, I'm sorry to say, apart from some people who are very intelligent and to exploit it for their own use, like Steve Bannon. But the majority is not clever, and I do think at least the students at the age of students, when you're 18, you want to make your own choices. You want to find out what is good for you. And if I talk to students, that's what they talk about. They say, this fits with me, this does not fit with me. And they spend a lot of time thinking about this and what fits with me and what doesn't. And now, in the old days, you say, forget about this discussion because it doesn't lead to anywhere. You just have to follow course A or course B. And that's your only option. You study physics or chemistry, and that's it. And then the rest is clear. You don't have more options. And now you get more options. I think students will grab that. But I agree with you. At the same time, there's a lot of followers in certain trends, and people who have become fanatic about it, even stormed the parliament in the United States. Can you imagine that such a thing could happen? I still can't get over it. Yeah, that's also part of reality. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. You have nice sunglasses, by the way.
Yeah, good morning, Professor.
Good morning.
Yes, sir. You talk about the paradigm shift. That is the paradigm shift from the fourth generation model that we consider is obsolete.
Yes.
But my question is that towards the third generation, most of the activities is being aided by the computers, in which you log into the computer, you get facts, mostly based on heuristics approach. But students will use this to get good grades. They get good marks because they easily source the information from the computer. But the big problem, and what I'm taking now is this, that after the graduation, when it comes to the application, the good grade, the good certificate, but the application of that principle they learn in the university is always very difficult because they do mental shortcuts. They forget everything after getting the good grades. So that makes some of the employer have this doubt about the credibility of the university. That if a student gets good grade, maybe A class, at the end of the day, he cannot apply whatever he or she has learned in the university, then what is the essence? That is my question, sir.
Yeah, it's not an easy one to answer. Do you have any idea yourself how this could be solved? Because you have been thinking about this, obviously.
No, what I'm talking about is that getting good grades in the university, because the first generation and the second generation model is obsolete.
Yeah.
Now, towards the third generation, they use computer-aided devices to source information.
Yeah. So this is a typical situation where you say what we have now, we know it is going to fade away, but it is still uncertain of what is coming, and you see a lot of contours, things coming up that you say this will surely play a role, this will probably play a role, but no one has a complete picture. And actually, I think there will not be a complete picture, not just a model that all the universities in the world will copy. It will be very individualized and by universities. Because nowadays, or at least, let's say 50 years ago, basically universities all over the world were exactly the same, teaching the same things, having the same styles. The staff would sit in the same lounges and drink their tea or coffee. That was maybe the only difference, that in some countries you drink coffee like in Holland, and in other countries like Russia you drink tea, but for the rest it was very much the same. And now these institutes chose very different paths. Some have more distance learning, have more this, more that. So there becomes a larger diversity. I think the third generation learning is, actually, it's good that you point this out. The first buzzword is probably diversity. No longer a standard model, but just like a student can choose an individual course, also the university can choose an individual course. I hope that helps.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Hello, Professor Hans.
Hello.
I have a question about the third generation learning.
Yes.
So, in your opinion, when this exciting moment, I mean, the third generation learning will become, I mean, after 5 years, after 10 years, I mean.
No, I think you can't put a watch to it. You can't say in 3 years we have achieved this or that. First of all, it will be different for different universities, and for different schools for that matter. There's also enormous diversification in grammar schools, in the secondary schools, and even in primary schools. I was very surprised that my granddaughter, when she was 8 years old, gave a PowerPoint presentation on some environmental impact. I thought, my God, and she made it herself on a computer. So, and it's nothing special, you know, I'm a proud grandfather, but No, there's nothing special. All these children do this. So yeah, it is changing very much. So I think it is gradually changing, and it is a flux. It will stay changing. I don't think we will ever come back to a model say, now the university is ready. We are finished. We have accomplished all the changes we wanted to make. And now we are ready for the future. And for the next 20 years, we're just going into production. No, it will change all the time.
Okay, so we strongly believe that, well, this is the future trend, right?
Yeah.
So the generation, okay, I got it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I understand, by the way, that there's no audience, right? It is only video broadcast, this. Evgenia?
Yes, yes.
Ah, yes. I get it. I'm used to this large, beautiful hall of yours and speaking there, but no, this is quite different. I get the point, yeah.
Okay, so maybe dear students, and do you have more questions to Professor Hans Wissema? And I would also ask one question about the format
as long as it is not on digital marketing, because I don't know anything about it.
Okay, so I want to ask you about the traditional lecture. What do you think? What kind of training format would be most appropriate when there are more than 20 listeners or participants in one classroom? What do you think is the most appropriate format?
That's a difficult one. I was one of these people who was more focusing on research and on teaching, to be honest, and I've never been very good at it. Well, I think you have to have a basic feeling of what goes on in the class, and that's very difficult because these people come in from an environment. I had once a class with all kinds of giggling girls, and it was impossible to lecture, you know. So in the end, I sent them out of the class. Please, if you can't stop, go out. And much to my surprise, they went out because I thought that they would have stayed there and I didn't know what to do. But yeah, you want to the thing is, you don't get feedback, right? I mean, normally after talks like this, there's feedback. Maybe you ask people have listened, fill in a form. Did you like it? Was it all nonsense and poppycock, or was it to some extent useful? So you get feedback. You don't do that as a teacher, which is actually, yeah, I don't know why we don't do it. That would be helpful, but at least you can talk to people, and students always want to talk to the teacher. That's an axioma. If you have a class of 20, there are 3 or 4 people who want to talk to you individually. So what you do at the end of the lecture, you pack everything back in your bag and you rush off because you have another appointment. So you have 4 disappointing students who wanted to talk to you. Then they try to make an appointment, and your secretary tells them, Dr. Kass is very busy, she cannot see you this month, so you have to come back in January. Which, no, you know, you get my point. So here we get another. So you make time for students. Stay a bit behind and be open if they want to chat to you. That's not very helpful, I realize that, but this is the best I can do at this moment.
Okay, thank you. So, dear students, if you have any questions, you're welcome.
Okay, can make you one question about the new, how affect the new system learning now online, because you make the association with video games, for example.
With, sorry?
With video games, games.
Yeah.
But when we see video games, especially, we can see very beautiful games with a lot of graphics. But the difference between now a video games and one film is the interaction who the players do it with the games for learning. For example, you don't remember the number of all element chemics, but you remember the efficiency of every attack of Pokemon, for example.
Yeah.
It's more than the element chemics and the numbers. But when we say now the class online, for example, is more like a video when you have less interaction. The same if you make, you can say, okay, you have problem in internet, but if you don't have the level of interaction, is like see a films, how this can be affect the memorize in the opposite way than the video games, who you are more interactive than in the class.
Maybe the video games, but I will make a confession. You will be surprised, but I've never played a video game in my life, so I've no experience whatsoever. But I can guess. What I've seen of video games is that usually you have to solve. You have a puppet, let's say, or how do you call it? Which is you, and you have to fight someone else or find the treasure or the girl or both, and then the system gives you hints. Something begins to pop up, and they think, I have to press that and see what happens. Is it correct? And I guess that in the same way you can have a learning system that you have to find your way to the solution. So if first you get a problem, you have to find your way to the solution, and then you can get hints maybe from the system. But I must confess, I know next to nothing about it, so I'm not the right person to ask. Is there any gamer in the audience who would have a, yeah, all of you, of course, but anyone in particular?
It depends on how you would determine who the gamer is.
But Okasa, is that correct? Yeah. Oksana, yeah. Or do you have experience with gaming? Can you imagine how gaming, experience with video games, how that could help you learning?
I mean, as any other activity, the process of gaming includes many actions that can help someone improve their intelligence or their experience, even soft skills like communication with the game mates. I've also heard that, especially in VR, there are many spheres where it is used to help people to learn. For example, in medicine, there is a special VR trainer that helps cardiologists to train in operation on beating heart. So yeah. Obviously you can do it a lot in real life. So there are not.
Okay. Is that helpful, Camilo? Camilo?
But my
Camilo, sorry, Camilo. It's Spanish, right? Camilo.
Camilo, yes, it's Spanish.
Camilo or with an L, not Joe.
Yeah.
Then you would have had double L. Sorry, yes.
Yeah, it's in like Latin, Camillus. It's not problem.
Yeah, very good. Is it a good idea what she says?
Don't was the way of my question. My question was in the like more than focus in the video games, because the video game is in the practice is a game. You can associate with a solitary or a spider or whatever game of cards who you have the version online. You take action. Yes, I like, for example, strategy games. I like history strategy. You learn a little bit of history, for example. Not very accurate, but you create interest. But I associate, for example, with the online class is more like similar to films. For this reason, when I say you, for example, I don't know how many films. I remember a little bit of every film, but maybe I don't remember the name of the protagonist, whatever. In this case, the new situation for learning online, who is a tendency, can be in the same way who like a film, who, okay, you look, but after you don't remember. This is a little bit different to games because the interaction is more difficult online. And the disposition to participate is different, because in presential, if you are not interested, you listen in any way. Online, sometimes you can skip or make parallel stuff. In parallel stuff, you don't have the same efficiency in learning. For this reason, my focus was in how we can differentiate in the process of learning, or how can be affected, more than especially video games. Video games is like game online for something.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I suppose it's enough for questions, or if you maybe have the last one. No more questions. Okay, so dear Professor Vissema, thank you for a very informative lecture, which clearly showed how the formats of teaching has changed under the influence of digital revolution, under the technological revolution. And I suppose that it also shows the trends of present and future studying formats. And I'm sure that Tom State University will certainly introduce all the new trends in its educational process. Thank you very much for your time and for giving us.
It was a pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.